Welcome to Faith in 5, a weekly video devotional designed to discuss practical spiritual concepts in 5 minutes or less. I'm your host, Mark Vandella. One of my favorite things to do in the summer is to sit around a campfire and share stories. I've had the opportunity to do this a number of times, leading student ministries trips. We used to do this with students where we would have each student share their life story, and they would kind of talk about the good, the bad, the difficult, their hopes and their dreams. And there was just so much that came out of sharing that piece of our lives. And recently I had the opportunity to do this in some leadership training, basically an overnight retreat where we get to sit around a campfire and share things about ourselves. And the goal with doing so is that it just gives us this opportunity to practice vulnerability and authenticity. And right now I've been wrestling with this deep desire to display authenticity, vulnerability, and courage. And a lot of it is coming out of what I'm reading lately and how that applies to my faith. I've been reading a lot of Brene Brown lately, and this series that we're starting is based on her book called The Power of Vulnerability. And she says that those are the keys: the authenticity, the vulnerability, and courage are keys to deep meaning in our lives. And so in an effort to be fully transparent, recently I had to push pause on Faith in 5. And to be clear, there's nothing wrong. There's no real big issue. I just wasn't feeling it. I really wanted to do this well. I wanted to talk about vulnerability and transparency well. And I was feeling the weight of that, and I just didn't have it. I wanted to spend a little bit of more time sitting and reflecting and marinating on that and kind of letting it work instead of just following the timeline of getting another video out. So thank you for giving me that opportunity to push pause and reflect. And what I want to do is invite everyone who listens or watches this to think that we're all kind of sitting around a campfire, and we're going to share parts and pieces of our story, and we're going to map our faith onto that, because I think that that's what our faith calls us to do. Our faith calls us to be more authentic, more vulnerable, and more courageous. And so this is the start of that series. We're actually calling it Beautiful Things, which is inspired by one of my favorite worship songs by the same name. And in that song, it talks about God making beautiful things out of the dust, making beautiful things out of us. And admittedly, this song is weird. Like, the cadence of it is a little bit clunky. And it's hard to lead worship sometimes because it doesn't follow a normal cadence. And that's why I love it. It challenges me with the lyrics. And I think that it challenges me in my life, that some of what we need to do is bring some of that clunkiness, some of that imperfection to the table. And honestly, I have this deep desire to model authenticity, vulnerability, and courage. But one of the reasons is because in my life, one of the kind of leadership journey pieces that I've been wrestling with is really reflecting on something in my life. I'm pretty comfortable and have sat with people in some really dark places, some really vulnerable and transparent and courageous places. But one of the things I don't do well is let others into my space. And it's something I've been wrestling with. So my goal is to kind of give you a peek into that in this series. We're going to do 11 weeks throughout the summer and into the fall on what it might look like to be more authentic, more vulnerable, and more courageous. And this first week, the kind of the place to start is obviously the model of Jesus. But the thing that I want us to pull out of this week's talk is one of the reasons, or one of the ways that we do a good job of modeling these things, is based on the people around us. So the people we bring into our spaces give us that opportunity to step into authenticity, vulnerability, and courage. And the verse that I read recently that's really stuck with me is Jesus in Matthew 26, 37 through 39. Jesus is facing the most difficult time in his life, arguably. And he is basically talking to his disciples about the fact that his life is going to end. And he goes off to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray. And it says he took Peter and Zebedee's two sons, James and John, and he took them with him, even though he was struggling. He didn't try to keep it to himself. He didn't try to block everybody else. It says in the Bible, it says he told them, "My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch for me." So he let his people in on this. He's there with all 12. He invites 3 to go deeper. And then he goes off and he prays to God, and he lets God in on this difficulty. He went a little bit further. He bowed his face to the ground, praying, "My Father, if it's possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine." And so as we read this and we reflect on Jesus' model of authenticity, vulnerability, and courage, and we unpack this further in the coming weeks, a couple things that I want you to wrestle with in this campfire, beautiful things place. First, Brene Brown says in her book that the difficulty that is where we find deep meaning. And so when we don't go to these places of authenticity, vulnerability, and courage, then we don't experience fully, like full meaning in our lives. If we just seek happiness, we don't get all of the good that comes with this life. And so my encouragement in our faith is that we would examine that, and that we would take Jesus' example and look to work to model what these things look like. And the two things I want us to take away from Jesus' example and then also take into our faith is, one, consider the people around you. Who are the 12 that you walk with that get a picture of who you are? I have a group of people that I've given full permission to kind of observe my life, check me on social media, check me if I'm distant or like check in to keep me healthy. And then Jesus also models that there's 3 tight people, like discerningly so. We let them into some of those deepest, darkest places. And do we have any of those people in our lives? I believe Jesus models that. And then lastly, have we also gotten past this desire to be perfect in our faith when it comes to God? Do we only bring God the good and the glory, which is a beautiful thing to do, but do we also bring God our dark, our scared, our fear, all of those things, and do we lay those in front of him as well? And so as we consider what it might look like to be more vulnerable and transparent in our lives, in your faith, look for the people in your life, the 12 and the 3, and then also consider putting some of those things in front of God this week, and then join us as we walk through the next 10 weeks together. Thanks for watching Faith in 5. If you like what you see, please like and share. If you're interested in making a donation to our ministry, please click the link below.